Great. I think we'll make a start because we've got quite a lot to get through this morning. But just to wish you all a very warm welcome. I'm Sarah Sanders, and I'm a program manager for the Endangered Landscapes and Seascapes program. And I'm joined this morning by a few members of the team. So I'm just going to ask them to very quickly to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Thomas. I'm the director of the program.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm Barry Mulligan. I'm the Seascapes program manager.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jack. I'm the events coordinator for ELSP.
Great. And just to say, Jack is kind of doing all the technicals. So if you've got any kind of issues, just to let him know. But really, the purpose of this morning is to provide an overview of the ELSP and to give you all an opportunity to learn more about the call that we've released for our next round of planning grants. So an opportunity for you to kind of hear more, but also to ask us questions. Yeah, we've got, the session is kind of divided into two parts. So David is going to start, first of all, by just giving an overview of the ELSP. We'll then have a short pause for any questions, and then I will go into some of the specifics about the planning grant call. I think the first thing to emphasize is that the session is going to be recorded. So it will be available afterwards if you want to have a look at it again, or if you want to share it with colleagues. And secondly, if you have any questions, can you please put them in the Q&A box? And we will try to respond to as many of those questions as we can in this hour. Okay, David, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And again, welcome everyone. It's fantastic to see the level of interest in the program. I think we've got well over 200 of you have logged in for this introduction and overview of the program.
Hi, David. Sorry, just to interrupt. We can see the presenter view at the moment.
Okay, interesting. Let's just try another way then. No, it worked fine. Are you seeing it now?
I think you just need to go full screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks good. That's
good. Okay. Right. So, well, again, welcome to you all. I'm going to give a very quick overview of the program, just to give you all a kind of general sense for what we do and why we do it, as you think about your own individual landscapes and seascapes that you're thinking of submitting an application for a planning grant for. So I'm going to kick off just telling you a little bit about who we are. So the program is funded by Arcadia Fund. It's a UK-based fund supported by philanthropists Elizabeth Rousing and Sir Peter Baldwin. And it's managed by the Cambridge Conservation Initiative, which is an initiative closely associated with the University of Cambridge. The decisions and strategic oversight is provided by an oversight and selection panel. Now, what I'm going to do now is just say a little bit more about CCI and about the oversight selection panel. So the Cambridge Conservation Initiative, it's comprised of these 10 organisations that you can see listed here, working together with the University of Cambridge. Many of those organisations, I imagine, will be familiar to you already. So all of those organisations, they have offices and staff in the David Attenborough building. It's a building in the heart of Cambridge, which opened about 10 years ago and houses about 500 people, 500 conservationists, working on collaborative programmes in order to combine their expertise, their networks, their data to work together on conservation, linking science, policy and practice. And that's really the objective and purpose, is to maximise the effectiveness through collaboration and through these kind of diverse sets of skills and experiences and resources. Okay, so this is our team. It's made up of a number of different people. I'm not going to go through them individually. You've met some of us here today. Most of the staff have backgrounds working for environmental NGOs, a range of NGOs, both national and international. If you want to know more about us as a team, please do visit our website. So the Oversight and Selection Panel. So the decisions on which projects to fund is based on the recommendations of this group of people. So they're comprised of selected individuals, experts in ecosystem restoration that cover a range of geographies, institutional experiences, different disciplines. And it's their job to review each proposal against a set of criteria, then discuss the proposal's length, and then recommend to us which ones should be funded. The panel is divided into two groups. We have a marine group. Their names are shown on this slide. They're chaired by Dr. Tundi Agadi. And we have a terrestrial group that's chaired by Angelo Celsi. Again, brief biographies are available on our website if you're interested in learning a little bit more about our Oversight and Selection Panel. Okay, so that's who we are. That's very briefly how we're constituted and how we function. So now, again, just a very few words on our strategy. So this slide, it summarizes really in two simple paragraphs the context for the Endangered Landscapes and Seascapes program. So I guess as we all know, as you all know, landscapes and seascapes in Europe are badly degraded, and European Environment Agency data shows that most are in poor or bad condition. And this has cost society, as benefits from nature are lost or diminished, ecosystems are less resilient to climate change. And for decades, the efforts of environmental organizations have focused on really trying to conserve nature, often in small, fragmented, protected areas. And it's now recognized that we really need to do something a bit differently. And we need to restore nature and do so at landscape and seascape scale, the scale really at which ecosystem processes can create dynamic, healthy ecosystems. So if you take that bit of background, it's translated into our vision and mission in these two statements here. And I guess there are three takeaways from this statement. So the first is the large scale. So the program works on landscapes and seascapes. The second is the focus on ecosystems and issues to do with connectivity and natural ecosystem processes, so reduced management, getting away from the management approach of small nature reserves. And the third factor, an important one in the context of many landscapes and seascapes in Europe, is the connections between nature and people, which often are very deep and culturally and personally engaged in people's values and connections to those landscapes. So that really drives the focus for the program. And funding through grants is really the program's main activity. And that's why you're here today, interested in one category of our grants. But we have a set of other objectives which aim to both enable landscape and seascape restoration through advancing knowledge, inspiring action, and exchanging experience, and amplifying the impact of the program and the projects by using the program's showcase of projects and the evidence of impacts to influence policy and practice. So Sarah's going to, in a moment, provide a real in-depth introduction to planning grants. So I'll just mention a couple of relevant things about the program. Again, you can find our strategy document on the website with a lot more detail. So first of all, the program's main grants are awards of up to $5 million for landscape and seascape restoration. And since the first grants were awarded in 2018, 21 initiatives have been funded. You can find brief details, again, on our website and on the project pages, and in our news pages, you can find stories about individual projects. But what I suggest is if you're thinking of applying to the ELSP for a planning grant, you might find it helpful to take a look at these projects, including also the planning projects that are described, to really see this kind of scale, scope, and approach of initiatives that the programme seeks to support. What I guess one thing I would stress at this stage is that planning grants should not be seen as a pathway to planning for a full-size grant application, although many projects do go on to take that route and to submit a full application. That is not their purpose. And the other feature of the programme I think is worth mentioning here is its attention to science and monitoring. So we really believe that measuring impact is important, and we have a monitoring framework that's applied across all our ELSP funded projects, which then follows the philosophy of CCI, which I mentioned earlier, the linking of science, policy and practice. So project level monitoring collects landscape relevant evidence of impact that's shared through the ELSP's websites, our impact pages, but also we seek to bring it to high level decision makers, really to try and kind of shift the dial on restoration and conservation and environmental action across Europe. And the other part of our kind of evidence and impact measuring is the use of key performance indicators. So we use those to measure and communicate impact at programme level. And what's important about these indicators is that they map onto the indicators of the global biodiversity framework. And this allows the programme and the projects to demonstrate impact in terms that are often most relevant to decision makers. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and if there are any questions, I can seek to answer them.
So any questions to David about the ELSP programme in general? We'll come back to kind of the specifics of the planning grants in a moment, and just to remind everybody to use the Q&A box to post your questions. We'll just wait a minute or so in case anyone's got anything specific. And just to say thank you for all the questions so far. We will try to answer as many as we can during the webinar, but if not, we will follow up afterwards. Okay, David, I can't see anything there about kind of general ELSP, but you know, as we go through the webinar, if there is something you want to ask, please do add to the the Q&A box. Okay, I suggest we kind of move on. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, does that all look good? Great, okay. So yeah, David's given a really good introduction to the Endangered Landscapes and Seascapes programme. So what I'm going to do now is to talk about the specifics of the planning grant call. And as I've said before, if you've got any questions, please do put them into the chat box and we'll try and answer them as we go through the webinar or when I come to the end of my presentation. So what I'm going to do with these slides is just very quickly go over the purpose, go through the key criteria, and then try and preempt some of your questions from the questions that you often ask us, you know, what we've learned from previous calls. And just to say that all of the information that I am going to share here should be in the guidance. So just to, you know, recommend that you take the time to read through the guidance if you are considering an application, to read through that guidance carefully before completing the form. Okay, so why does the ELSP have planning grants? So we recognise that the restoration of natural ecological processes is complex. It requires working at a big scale. So it then means that you're going to be working with a range of landowners. Some of these could be private, some of these could be public, but also across a range of sectors as well. So that could be nature conservation, it could be water, it could be energy, it could be transport, but there's going to be a range of stakeholders involved. So we recognise that the time and resources to kind of set up a new landscape or seascape initiative could be a major barrier for new initiatives from starting. So we offer these grants to help you with kind of planning landscape and seascape restoration. And this includes the time or the process needed to build partnerships, to co-develop theories of change, but also to assist with kind of working out kind of budgets and thinking about where you may be able to kind of raise resources to kind of deliver an initiative in the longer term. I think something to point out at the very beginning is that these are standalone grants. As David mentioned in his presentation, we kind of the main function of the ELSP is to actually support landscape and seascape restoration across Europe, and we're already kind of supporting 21 initiatives. If you do get a planning grant, this is not a guarantee that you will get funding beyond a planning grant from the ELSP to deliver your initiative, but we hope that you can use that plan to kind of raise funds potentially from elsewhere. And I think just to say, and I will come back to this later in my presentation, that most of the project or the planning grants that we've supported have been able to raise significant funding to implement their plans, and mostly not from the ELSP. So what are the key features of a planning grant? Well, first of all, just to say it is a competitive process, and we are anticipating that there is going to be a lot of interest in this call. It is 2 stages. The first stage involves putting together an expression of interest. This is done through an online form. It's a short form. We have 8 questions, essentially, for you just to give a very brief description of the landscape or seascape that you would like to restore, to kind of let us know why it needs restoring now and kind of what some of the opportunities in the longer term may be, to give a very brief overview of some of the activities that you will undertake to put together the plan, to kind of share some of the stakeholders that you may need to engage with, and also just to share kind of a map showing kind of the location of where your landscape or seascape may be within a country. If your expression of interest is successful, then you'll be invited to stage 2, and you'll be asked to submit a full proposal, and this will provide much more detail on what you will do to develop a restoration plan. So we'll ask for kind of details about your budget. We'll want a lot more information about kind of the process and the activities that you want to deliver. We'll also need to see kind of audited accounts for your organisation and letters of support from your government stakeholders. You can apply for a grant of up to $120,000. Projects last for a maximum of up to 2 years. I would say that the minimum is probably 1 year for a planning process. We limit kind of the number of applications per organisation to 3, and the maximum number of planning grants that we will fund in a country is 2. So what about the criteria? And these are all kind of summarised in the guidance to the planning grants. But as David has mentioned in his presentation, the decisions on the projects that we support as a programme are made by the Oversight and Selection Panel. And we have a panel that will look at the seascapes and a panel that will look at landscapes. So the sorts of things that they will be looking for, well, fundamentally, kind of the main criteria is looking at your landscape and seascape to see whether it's really going to restore natural processes at scale. So is it focusing on natural processes? You know, are the actions that are going to be delivered, are they going to benefit biodiversity? Are they going to provide ecosystem services for people? Is the process proposed really going to build a partnership? Is it meaningful? Is it going to engage with key stakeholders? You know, are the consultations going to take place? Is the process realistic? And are there going to be opportunities in the longer term to take your plan forward? So these are all things that the OSP will consider when reviewing your expression of interest. And by the end of a planning grant, or by the end of the project, we would hope to see a plan and evidence that a thorough stakeholder analysis has been undertaken to kind of identify the key partners and stakeholders that will need to be involved in kind of developing and delivering a plan. That a theory of change has been developed. So you've got a long-term vision, and that the pathways for achieving kind of the outcomes to get to that vision are clearly mapped out. That you've thought about the tipping points so that your plan is really about kind of helping nature to get to a point where it can look after itself, i.e. kind of reducing kind of the need for human kind of management intervention. That the partnership has got the right organizations on it to take that plan forward. And this might be kind of very slightly different to the organizations that are involved in developing the plan. That there's an estimate of the costs to deliver the plan. You've thought about kind of where the funds are going to come from for developing that plan, and that you have got some maps which kind of indicate the boundary of the landscape or the seascape that you're wanting to work in, and kind of priority areas for restoration. Now, to kind of put together all of that, we recognise that there may be a lot of feasibility and scoping studies to be undertaken. This is not just about ecology. You may need to look at kind of the legislative, the policy, kind of the financial incentive frameworks or funding opportunities that are available. You may need to have consultations with communities that are within or around kind of your landscape and seascape. You know, there's a lot of work that needs to go into developing a plan. So that all needs to be included as well, so that you can develop the plan. Just to highlight a couple of new features to the planning grants. So we have increased the amount available that can be applied for. So previously, the maximum was $100,000. We've increased that to $120,000, but you don't have to ask for the full amount. It may be that you can develop your plan with a smaller amount of resource. Because we are anticipating kind of significant interest in this call, the maximum number of planning grants that will support in a country at any one time is going to be 2. But just to say that by the time we come to award these planning grants, all of the current planning grants will have completed. So there is an opportunity if to potentially support a planning grant in countries across Europe. It's not limited by country. And then just, I kind of picked out a few questions that we often get asked as people are kind of preparing their applications, and they seem to kind of fall into 2 categories. The first group of questions are often linked to eligibility. So a lot of people ask us about kind of geographic eligibility. And so this is just to remind you that we only fund projects in Europe. And our kind of boundary for Europe is based on the Europe Environment Agency kind of map of Europe. Just to say, for Seascapes, we do include, in addition to that map, all the countries that border the Mediterranean. So that includes kind of North Africa and those countries in the Middle East as well. But please do look at the guidance to see that list of countries. It really is about kind of restoring natural ecological processes. So we are not going to support planning grants that are focused on a site or a nature reserve or a species. Yeah, it's for landscapes or seascapes. If you are not sure, don't worry, we have included a box on the expression of interest form, which you can tick if you're not sure. We do look at kind of the area that you're suggesting and kind of the actions proposed, and we'll make a decision on whether it kind of falls more into a landscape or a seascape. But we do recognise that it's, you know, it's quite grey in that kind of coastal area. And I think we've already had a question about that in our Q&A box. But, you know, to get in touch with us if you're not sure, and also to tick that box on the expression of interest form. It's really important that the lead partner is a not-for-profit and non-governmental organisation, but you can work in partnership with all sorts of different stakeholders. And we don't support standalone research. So if there are going to be any kind of surveys or scoping studies done as part of the planning process, then it must be very clear that this is information that's been collected to contribute to the development of that plan. It's not a piece of kind of scientific research on its own. In terms of the budget, we often get asked about whether overheads can be included, and yes, they can. Up to 12% can be included, but this can only be charged on direct costs. So if you've got staff that are involved in kind of delivering the project, then you can really only kind of base your overhead on kind of those direct costs. It's not for the total cost of the planning grant. And then just finally, we're often asked if there's a need to show co-finance, and there is no requirement for co-finance in a planning project. And just a map kind of showing you kind of the existing and completed planning grants. So far, we've supported 20 across Europe. I think our most northerly and westerly has been in Iceland, and going further east, it's the West Kazakh steppe in Kazakhstan, but we've also supported 3 planning projects in the Caucasus, in Georgia and Armenia. In terms of numbers, I think we've had 4 in the UK, 2 in Spain and 2 in Georgia. But you can see that there are quite a few countries where we've not supported planning grants so far. And, you know, what I'd recommend before you do complete the expression of interest form, if you are considering to put in an application, to please go and have a look at kind of the planning grants that we've funded before. And I think, yeah, the link, Jack is going to put the link into the Q&A box. But I just kind of wanted to kind of pull out 2 examples to share with you. These are planning grants that we've supported, but have actually gone on to kind of raise funds from elsewhere. So, yeah, we've supported a project in the Humber Estuary in the UK. This is a really important international site for waterbirds breeding and migratory. And this was a project that was led by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, and they were working with 32 partners to essentially develop a plan for that coastal corridor along the estuary. It involved a lot of feasibility and scoping studies, essentially to kind of build up maps to kind of show where the gaps were in terms of connectivity. And then kind of knowing where those gaps were, they've kind of developed a series of projects. And one of the projects was kind of looking at that kind of intertidal area and looking at kind of the restoration of that. And they've gone on very successfully to kind of raise funds from DEFRA and Orsted to take that work forward. But they've also got a whole suite of projects, you know, that they're going to different funders to kind of raise the funding for. And then the other kind of planning grant I wanted to mention is the West Kazakh Steppe. This is probably, in terms of the area, the biggest planning grant we've supported. I mean, the area is absolutely huge. It's part of the Altyn Dala initiative. It's about kind of 5 million hectares. But really kind of looking at what's happened in the past in terms of land use and thinking about what's going to happen in the future in terms of climate change, to kind of work with key stakeholders to build a plan. And really it's about kind of securing, I suppose, the migration routes for the Saiga antelope. And some of you may know this already, but the Altyn Dala initiative was successful in kind of raising funds from the Earthshot Prize in 2024. So I think really just flagging here that there's no guarantee that there will be ELSP funding after you've finished your planning grant, but there are lots of opportunities out there to kind of raise funds from elsewhere. So please do have a look at our website for examples. Just to go very quickly through the process. So if you are interested in submitting an expression of interest, the deadline is the 20th of January. And then we have a few weeks where those expression of interests go out to the OSP for review. They should all be reviewed by at least 3 of our panel members. They will then meet in March, round about the 24th, to make the decision about which ones will go through to stage 2. And we are kind of anticipating that about 30 proposals will be selected. Half of them should be seascapes and half of them should roughly be landscapes. So 30 proposals going through. And then at the moment, we are anticipating that stage 2 proposals should be submitted at the beginning of June, on the 2nd of June, so that the OSP can meet towards the end of July to make the decision on which proposals will be funded. And again, we're anticipating sort of between 15 to 18 proposals, and again, hoping, you know, to have an equal distribution of landscapes and seascapes. As I say, the stage 2 timings may change, but if they do, we will let you know as soon as possible when we get to that stage. But that is what the timetable is looking like at the moment. And I suppose anticipating or hoping that all planning grants will start from about 12 months from today. So kind of looking towards sort of next September, October. And then, yeah, if you do get a planning grant, yeah, there is support from the ELSP. So you'll have a program manager to give you support. We ask for progress reports every 6 months. We will also ask you to kind of provide a news story. I think we ask for probably about 1 news story a year so that we can promote it kind of on our communications channels. We'll also invite you to join our restoration network so that you can have access to kind of the webinars and knowledge network cafes that we run, but also we share a knowledge exchange newsletter on a monthly basis, just kind of sharing information about kind of ELSP and other events that may be happening. So just to kind of finish off and to very quickly summarize the kind of key information to take away from this webinar. The deadline, of course, is the 20th of January at 5 o'clock, kind of UK time. Please make sure that you have read the detailed guidance before you do fill in an online application. But meanwhile, if you've got any questions about landscapes, then to get in touch with myself. If it's seascapes, then to get in touch with Berry. And our email addresses are there. And then just finally, to kind of keep up to date with what's happening on the program, we do encourage you all to sign up to these channels. We have a website, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and also on Blue Sky. And I think I shall just leave it there. Thank you.